Hello my dear friends. Reading the car train times when heading to a job interview. Double checking that box of hair dye to make sure it won't turn your hair green. Understanding the small differences between words like began and began. These are the types of things that need a lot of attention to detail. While we can help you with train schedule or hair products, I can help you with began and began. These two verb forms come from the English infinitive to begin. If you look closely, there is only the letter difference, and yet they are used in very different ways. So, are you ready for me to introduce them? Let's get started. As noted in the introduction, began and began are different forms of the verb to begin. This is an irregular verb that has several functions in English. Most commonly, it describes an action that starts to happen, as in the following sentence. He begins to read. One of the best ways to deal with irregular verbs like this is to spend a lot of time with them. Try writing out the conjugation and do a lot of reading and listening. Over time, using irregular verbs correctly will become natural to you, and you'll be able to use them with confidence when speaking and writing. Remember, that is not a big problem if you make a mistake. As with began and began, your meaning will most likely be understood even if your grammar is not 100% correct. Began. The introvert who likes to be alone. I'd like to introduce you to Began. To worry, if he doesn't say hello back, he's kind of shy and doesn't like to be around others. So whenever we use began in English, we always have to remember to use its own. Now it's time for the grammatical explanation. Began is the simple past tense of the verb to begin. This tense is used for an action of any duration that has finished in the past. Let's take a look at some examples. It began to rain. She began to sing. I began to cry when I saw the disgusting lunch menu. You began to run because you were afraid of the dog. As you can see in the last two examples, began can be used before a conjunction like the word when. To introduce another clause, I saw the disgusting lunch menu. It never changed form. So, whether you are starting your sentence with I, you, he, she, we or they, began stays the same few. The most important thing to notice is how began is always used by itself without a friend, which in grammatical terms is called an auxiliary verb. This is going to be more important in the next section. So, for now, let's say goodbye to began and hello to began. So, if began was the shy one, began is the twin who can be described as a party animal, someone who loves to party. He can never be on his own and always needs a friend, an auxiliary verb hanging around. If you can remember this difference, you'll make the right choice about which word to use. The most common auxiliary verb forms come from the English verb to have. For example, had, has, have, and will have. Unlike the simple past we encountered earlier, began is the past participle that's used with the three perfect tenses: past perfect, present perfect, and future perfect. They also describe a completed action, but the more complex, suggesting how a previous action affects a current condition. For example, I had begun to style my hair for the party when I realized there was a storm outside. To construct this sentence, we need to start with the auxiliary verb, adding began afterwards. They had begun to play soccer before I got there. He has begun to smoke again. We have begun cooking the meal that we are going to eat tonight. I will have begun my speech by the time you arrive. Remember, that is speech and informal writing. The personal pronoun and the auxiliary verb usually contract and use an apostrophe. They'd begun. This isn't to punish language learners but to make things easier to express when using natural English. Of course, there are alternatives to the verb to begin. One that I've been using throughout this article is the verb to start. This verb is slightly more informal and you can use it when speaking and writing in most situations. Be careful when using this in formal writing though, as to begin is often the better choice. I have great news. To start is a regular English verb. This means that while there might be some confusion choosing either began or began, we should have fewer problems when dealing with the tenses of to start. Let's look at to start in the simple past. I started my homework last night. They started laughing when they saw the clown. We started a new yoga class. You started learning Arabic. Now, he is to start as a past participle with the perfect tense. Note that we have to use the auxiliary verb once again. She had started reading an old novel. It has started to snow. We have started a new project at work. He will have started his journey by now. See how in both cases start becomes started. This makes it a super easy alternative to the verb to begin. First, to begin by doing something, the first idiomatic expression we are going to look at is so begin by doing something, which means to start something by taking a specific action. Let's take an example using the infinitive form of to begin. I begin by showing you how to use an English expression. In the simple past using began, it looks like this. I began by adding the eggs to the flour. And using a perfect tense auxiliary verb plus began, it would be he has begun by stretching before going out for a run. Second, to begin to see the light. The second expression is to begin to see the light. This is a useful expression in English when you want to express how a situation is clear to you in the present but wasn't clear to you in the past. For example, she begins to see the light about how horrible her boss is. In the simple past using began. You began to see the light when it came to your boyfriend. And using a perfect tense auxiliary verb plus began. He will have begun to see the light by the time he realizes we've stolen his credit card. Third, life begins at age. The final expression we're going to look at it is life begins at age. This is an expression you'll hear in relation to the aging process. It means that just because someone reaches a particular age, traditionally 40, it doesn't mean they can restart their life and take pleasure in it. For example, life begins at 40. In the simple past using began, life began at 70 for Sarah, and is a perfect tense auxiliary verb plus began. Life has begun at age 50 for Mark. I hope after this video you have a clearer sense of the troublesome twins began and began, and that you can check this grammar point off your list. Proficiency comes with time, so remember to keep practicing your irregular verbs through writing, speaking, reading. My sympathy was with you. See you soon.